Welcome to the Going Deep podcast. Brendan Angelo and Matt Waldman with you here tonight. We've got a fun show, pretty jam packed. We're going to talk about some early thoughts on 2025 prospects, talk about Rashee Rice's injury, and then get into some players who aren't starters in the league, but maybe they could become quality starters in 2 to 3 seasons. Unofficially, our love for a young tight end thread, I guess,
Yep.
might be what this
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, for sure.
And if we got time, we might get into a little bit of the Jaguars backfield, and we'll talk a little bit about Josh Allen's bad week and maybe what are some things that we need to watch out for, because definitely looked like he was playing at Wyoming in some of those
Yeah.
what the fuck games that he had
Yeah.
before he became a Bill.
Yep. Yep. And there were many of those at Wyoming, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, that's for sure. So let's kick it off with some of the let's kick it off with Rashee Rice and just talk
Sure.
about that injury and how bad is it, because certainly we can leverage your skills and your experience in this area to learn a little bit more. So,
Yeah.
let's get it rolling.
Yeah. It's a great one to start off with. I think for me, when I look at that injury, I think the funny thing is what's being reported is the LCL, right? It's an LCL injury. Well, then when you saw Schefter report, they're going to have to go in and repair the LCL, but also repair the hamstring tendon. That is, if you kind of have a tier list of, in my opinion, from my field, injuries that are from the mountain down, Achilles tendon rupture is one. Then we have patellar tendon rupture. After that, we have hamstring tendon rupture. Like, that is number 3.
Wow. Okay.
And then we have, couple, like you can lump ACL and some of the other ones in there. Quadricep tendon, that's a really bad one too. But when you talk about how hard it is to recover from some of these, the LCL, if it was just an LCL injury, look, 6-7 months and he's back to return to play. 8 months and he's back to return to prior performance, I would say, right?
Okay.
The hamstring tendon, that is probably the trickier one, because what's going to happen is it's all the decelerative force and also to all the velocity that you need along with it, but also too, it's a stabilizer for the knee. So we're going to see Rashee Rice, who's one of his best traits as an athlete is how he handles different contact types as a receiver. Like, he's one of the best yards after catch players in the NFL right now. It is going to be very hard for him to have that trait as when he hangs his hat on in the next year and a half, I would say. That the hamstring tendon injury, the rupture and the repair, to me, return to full performance, we're looking at close to 16 to 18 months.
Okay.
Like, it is I was talking to my friend who's physical therapist who's worked with athletes as well. We were talking about Rashee Rice, and he didn't know about the hamstring tendon. He's like, oh man, like, I've seen that end careers. Like, that is a extremely significant injury that we're not talking enough about. We're talking about the LCL, and it's not as bad. It's not an ACL. I would rather have an ACL tear than a hamstring tendon rupture. Like,
wow.
any day of the week. Like, that's the severity of that injury. Just because of how much it's responsible for on the field. Like, your ACL, like, there's guys in the NFL who don't play with them. Tajay Spears is one of them, right? You need your ACL, yes. And repairing it is obviously super important. LCL repair, like I said, 6 to 8 months. Hamstring tendon rupture is one of the trickier injuries, because you might not be the same from a force production standpoint ever again. Neurologically, that takes a lot longer to get back to where you were. So that's my fear, is that's a much more significant injury, in my opinion, than the LCL that's reported.
Why do you think people are just kind of skipping it over? Is it just an ignorance about how serious the injury is? Because, like, I'm looking at, like, Sports Illustrated, for instance. I mean, I know, but they just wrote repaired, quote unquote, done to hamstring, and then there's nothing even mentioned in the article about the hamstring tendon.
Right.
And also he had successful surgery on an LCL and also had a hamstring procedure done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is, I think it is an ignorance. I think it's partially because we are very fixated on joints in the NFL, right? Like knee, hip, etc., ankle. Okay. So we see those as the more significant ones. We see hamstrings as soft tissue, right? Like Nico Collins, grade 2 hamstring strain, should be back in a couple months at the longest, right? We see that as kind of lumped into that category as, those can linger, but those aren't as bad. But it's really rare to find really significant ones where it's a full rupture. And those are extremely rare. With athletes I've worked with, I've only had a couple of those in the decade plus I've been in my field. And those are very tricky, very significant in terms of timetable. You're looking at over a year in some cases. But the good thing is Rashee Rice is going to have some of the most impactful individuals in the field working with him. And obviously, having Patrick Mahomes as your quarterback is going to help that, I think, a little bit too. The who's going to be wanting to work with Rashee Rice on this repair. But I think a lot of it is ignorance in terms of people think as the hamstring injury is the secondary one. For me, it's the primary. I mean, this is the 100% harder one to recover from, more impactful long term, has a significant impact on his rest of career outlook. The LCL, no, it's not even, it's like in my opinion, the severity of a torn meniscus.
Okay.
A little bit higher than that, but nothing in my opinion that is a potential for like super long term involvement. But the hamstring tendon is a very severe and should not be overlooked injury.
So with that in mind, people are going to ask from a fantasy perspective, is this the time to sell Rashee Rice? Or are you at a point, are you selling, is this a point where someone might say, am I still selling at a higher value than what he'll wind up being? Or do I just want to wait and see with him because at this point I'm not getting the return. I'm not getting a return while he's injured anyway.
Right. Yeah, that's a tough conversation. I was talking to my friend about that too because he's in the home league I'm in and he has Rashee Rice, and it's difficult because you don't want to sell budding superstars. Those are very hard to come by in fantasy. Even if you sell for a first round pick or a first and a second or whatever that may be, it's a dart throw on whether you're going to get one of those, right? I mean, even if you get a guy like, let's say, Luther Burden, the next class, who's a very good player, I don't think he could. There's a chance he doesn't turn out to be as good as Rashee Rice was, right? And then could be Rashee Rice returns to form in a year to 16 months, and he's Pro Bowl level again, right? And that's the tough thing is I'm of the camp always of you don't offload your superstars if you can help it, right? Because those guys are rare, especially young ones like Rice. So I think it's hard because the injury is significant enough for me to be like he might not ever be the same again. But it really depends on like what you get. Like if you get a really good young player, like let's say someone's like, all right, I'll give you like Marvin Harrison Jr. or something, and then like a pick. And sure, yeah, I mean,
but you're not going to get that. Yeah.
But you're not going to get a package like that. So that's the tough thing is you might get a package from someone who'll give you like a mid first or something like that, or is willing to wait. But you're likely not going to get it from someone who's like a non-contender because they're going to want the high pick. They're going to want, right. Ted McMillan or someone or in the next draft class and take their chances on that. So that's the difficult part of that conversation. It's, you don't who's buying at that point and what's the price. But with guys like that who are on the cusp of superstardom, Rice is on pace for like 1,500 yards, right? So it's like guys like that are hard to come by, but you just got to hope and pray that he recovers and he's the same. But also too, if you're buying, If you're buying Rashee Rice, you gotta wait until the first couple games because in my opinion, you're gonna come back, and it's not gonna be the same. It's gonna be like Tank Dell this year, similar. Matt Harmon talked about it. You and I talked about before the show. You're not gonna be the same for X amount of time.
Yeah,
you gotta know that going in, because there's a window of opportunity there to buy.
yeah. Well, since we weren't really going to talk too much about Tank, but I do have a side question with that.
Sure.
I think most people are probably thinking, well, with that offense, we're probably looking at Stephon Diggs and, Tank Dell probably taking on more of what's going on with Nico Collins while he's out.
Sure.
But what do you think about the idea Xavier Hutchinson having a potential opportunity to become a contributor in a fantasy lineup? What do you think about that possibility?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think the role that Nico Collins plays that's super hard to duplicate is the level 3 stuff he does. Right. I don't think there's not a guy in that offense that can do that.
Right.
So they're going to have to be more creative in terms of their double moves. And that's a Tank Dell department thing. Diggs doesn't have the long juice anymore, the long speed, as they call it. To do that, in my opinion, I think Diggs is a great short to intermediate option. I've liked that they've utilized him in the slot this year, giving him a two-way go, crafty veteran, right? Helps you in the intermediate areas of the field. I think if Dell is recovered in the next 2 weeks, we're going to see that production on level 3 shoot up like it was early on in his rookie year when we kept seeing the deep shots to him and CJ Stroud. I don't think he's there yet, but I think that's going to be something we see. I think Hutchinson might play more of a possession role, and I think it's an important one in that offense because you're going to have to play more ball control-based football. That defense is very good, one of the best pass rushes in the NFL. But the missing link here is the running game, right? With Joe Mixon, his health is paramount for them, kind of getting through this tough stretch of Nico Collins being out for potentially a couple months. I think Joe Mixon comes back from his high ankle in 2 weeks. I think 2 weeks. So you're looking at about 5-ish weeks without Nico with Joe Mixon. I think he gets a lot of work. I think they lead on the run game a bit more. But I think a hidden beneficiary is going to be Dalton Schultz. I think he's going to be someone who steps up and takes a bigger target share. And we saw that when he was in Dallas when it was him, Amari, and CeeDee Lamb, right? When it was a stretch of time when I think Amari Cooper got hurt and you saw Dalton Schultz really, really step up from a production standpoint. And then he's a steady veteran too. That's a presence that CJ Stroud can rely on.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. And I think that really if you're going to look, I kind of look at it as two ways. Like if Tank Dell is ready to go and play outside and be that outside deep threat, then there's a good chance too that Robert Woods is used a little more often in 3 and 4 receiver sets because he's a decent fit for the slot, and you can use Stephon as more the flanker, or you can switch him and Stephon off as flanker slot. I think that if they feel that Tank isn't quite ready yet, then what Xavier Hutchinson does give you at the boundary, at least the intermediate boundary, is a contested catch guy who is very strong at winning the ball on those types of routes. And he's a good route runner. He's just not super explosive. So you're going to see him more. I watched him against Buffalo, and it looked more the same of what I saw of him on tape at Iowa State as well as in preseason, which was good route runner, works very well off structure to find open spots, good runner after the catch, and has very good acrobatic ability to earn the ball. The problem is he's not going to get a ton of separation on you unless he's kind of a Juju Smith-Schuster type of player early in Juju's career. Like when Juju was at USC and still had a little bit of that electricity in his athletic ability. That was kind of where Xavier Hutchinson has a little bit of that going on. So yeah, I mean he's a dark horse type of player. If you want to spend a couple bucks on him, in bidding on, tonight probably for most of you, which mean that this is out after you've already done it. Fine, but he'll probably be available to you right now, and you can get him for free. And as long as as long as you're not getting rid of anybody who has more consistent production right now,
Right.
then you can take a shot on him.
Yeah.
So let's move along and talk a little bit about let's talk about Tank Bigsby and Travis Etienne. Okay, watching this seems to be like the hot thing I'm hearing is Tank Bigsby's about to take over in Jacksonville. He's his utilization is way up. His production is high. He's running back 8 the past 2 weeks. And I profiled Tank Bigsby in my football guys column, I think after week 1, like early week 2. And I thought, Tank looks like Tank Bigsby that I saw at Auburn. The difference between Tank Bigsby at Auburn and Tank Bigsby last year in Jacksonville is that Tank Bigsby at Auburn was holding on to the football and maintaining ball security. Otherwise, I saw a running back who could be determined, who likes to bounce things and cut back things, and sometimes he doesn't always needs to be a little more selective about doing that. He has enough burst that he can flip a field when there's a big crease, and he looks good when he gets momentum downhill.
Yeah.
And those are all good things. But none of those things said to me he's a future Joe Mixon. What I really saw was, all right, he can take some of the workload away from Travis Etienne and work between the tackles, though he still has got a little bit of a ways to go. So my thought is this, and I want to run by you, is that what I've been telling people is Tank Bigsby is a running back 3 for matchups. He's the next 3 weeks he's facing defenses that are not particularly strong up the middle. And when the Jaguars are facing a team that can be run on inside, Tank Bigsby's going to have the opportunity for a decent day to a big day. And then when he faces a lot of teams after 3 weeks that don't that stop the run well, because like the Eagles, who have like 2 big guys in the middle and plug that up, then you're going to be probably looking at Etienne on the edges and Etienne in open space. And Bigsby's a screen player. He's not really a dynamic receiving component out of the backfield. So to me, I look at Tank Bigsby and go, if you have him right now, trade him. Like in redraft leagues, trade him. Because in the next 1 to 2 weeks, he's going to have 2 good weeks, probably against, I'm trying to remember who he's got. New England, Green Bay,
Chicago
and
this
Chicago this week.
Yep.
And he's got a chance to have production 2 of those 3 weeks, maybe all 3. After a couple weeks building that up, and when he gets a nice healthy fantasy value, heading into week 7, week 8, that's when you should unload this guy, unless you have a luxury that he can be like your running back 3 that you plug in as your running back 3. And then at the end of the year, there's going to be some decent matchups for him again.
Right.
But there's going to be a stretch trying to get into the playoffs that if you don't need him and you could use something else and you've got decent running back depth, get rid of him.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I think it's interesting because it's a similar conundrum in Tampa Bay, right? With White and Bucky Irving. And the issue is neither are that good to be lead backs.
Right.
Like Etienne was a first-round draft pick who never developed the requisite pre-contact and processing skill set in muddy situations to be worthy of a first-round draft pick, right? And he showed flat. I mean, ceiling was a Pro Bowler in my opinion coming out of Clemson. Great accelerator from a linear fashion, super dynamic as a screen player, can really beat you with his accelerative abilities. But he doesn't have the requisite through contact skills to be a lead back. He has to develop those. They haven't developed. The processing as well, the process coupling stuff hasn't developed. Tank Bigsby has gotten better since he's been in the league. That's the issue. Is Etienne is going down the mountain and Tank Bigsby is going up the mountain but neither are top of the mountain guys.
Yeah.
And that's going to be the tough part. Is it's going to be a, throw a dart at either one on a weekly basis. And there you go. You're right in that, on the interior right now, Tank Bigsby is a much better option than Travis Etienne is, especially because Etienne is nursing that shoulder injury.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that's tough is Etienne's had an issue with durability throughout his career. Missed his whole rookie year with Lisfranc, has had a myriad of injuries since then and at Clemson. So you're looking at a guy who is not the picture of durability. Tank Bigsby is a guy that can shoulder a load if need be. So if he's the one getting volume of rushes upwards of 17 to 20 touches, then sure, I'll take the guy with the value. Is either guy going to be someone that's a top 12 back in any offense? Probably not. I don't think either of them.
And will there even be game scripts enough game scripts for Tank to get that many touches?
And that's the tough thing too, is like you're gonna have to bank on him as a receiver because the Jacksonville defense isn't very good.
Yeah.
So they're gonna be playing from behind, a lot of trail scripts with Jacksonville. So that's a tough thing too, is you want Tank to get going, rhythm runner too. So you want him to really get going in games. That's gonna be tough to do with the current iteration of the Jacksonville Jaguars. And so it's tough. I mean, but for me, like if I have Tank Bigsby, I'm kind of with you. Like he's a super hot name. Like if the player's not elite, sell at the peak.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the thing is Tank Bigsby is not an elite player. He had some nice moments his early career at Auburn. But I like him more as a secondary piece, an energy giver, can have a career similar to like a Jamal Williams plus type player, which is a good thing. Like that's not a bad career at all. Jamal Williams had 20 touchdowns, I think, 2 years ago, right? With Detroit. Like had a great role. Like Roshan Johnson's carving out a good role in Chicago as a short yards and goal line back. Like there's an opportunity for Tank to carve out a nice career as a secondary specialty option as a running back. But I don't think it's a situation like Detroit where you have two true, top 10, top 12 backs that are interchangeable in a sense.
Or Kenneth Walker if he were on any other team.
Right. Correct. Yeah. I mean, Kenneth Walker is he's a top 8, 10 back in himself. And Tank Bigsby is not that from a talent perspective. And I think the opportunity is not going to be a week-to-week thing with the current, like I said, the current iteration of the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Good. Okay, so let's move on, and before we get on to the look at some of the 2025 picks, I was watching Josh Allen this week, and we talked about the Wyoming thing, and it was interesting because it was like what I saw was a guy who got greedy. There were a number of short throws that were open. It was like he got bored of Joe Brady's offense and said, "Fuck this! I don't want to do this anymore. Let's go downtown. I like going downtown." He's like, I don't remember his name. Tim Robbins in Bull Durham when he plays the pitcher. He wants to throw the heat like every time, and it's like that's kind of where Josh Allen kind of feels like he was doing in this game. And then he'd go away from the easy solution, try to go to the hard one, and he'd either miss the throw or his receivers maybe drop the ball, or he had to throw tougher balls that were like really fit in there, or really harder throws because he had to sling it to get it in there. It literally looked like he's like, I'm just bored. It's too easy what we were doing. I need a challenge. I want some ego throws. And and he was 9 for 30.
Yeah, it was funny. It looked like Anthony Richardson morphed into Josh Allen for a second, right? Yeah. And it was back to Wyoming Josh. And I think Josh has that superhero mentality sometimes where it's like, all right, I have the check down, but I also have the low probability deep crosser that's covered. Let's throw it anyways. So it's like that's kind of like, in my opinion, what happened. I agree with you. I mean, 9 for 30 kind of tells you all you need to know in that perspective from what we usually see from Josh. I think a lot of it too is it. It also speaks to how important Khalil Shakir is to that offense.
Yes.
I mean, the passing game revolves around him
Yeah.
and in his health, which is not a good thing. Keon Coleman's miscast. I wholeheartedly agree with Steve Smith Sr. in that sentiment. He said that today. He's Coleman needs to play in the slot to get the most out of him. Dalton Kincaid's usage has been kind of odd.
And he went to Dalton like 3 straight times and couldn't hit him in one sequence. It was funny.
It's been weird. And then they had that weird like catch no catch too at a part in the game where I'm like, I thought he caught it, but I guess he didn't.
Yeah.
But it's like, Dalton Kincaid can be your safety blanket, but one thing I've realized is Josh Allen doesn't really like safety blankets as much as he probably should, especially in this game against the Texans. So I think he gets back on track. James Cook being out will be really bad if he actually does have turf toe. That'd be horrendous for Josh Allen. But I think Ray Davis is someone I think can step up and give them a physical element to the run game that they don't really have. I think James Cook is a really good in-space player. I think he's honestly a better version of DeAndre Swift. But I think as well you do need that physical, that power element to your run game in today's NFL to keep teams away from too high. And that's going to be something too that's going to be interesting, and seeing how Josh manages, taking the easier plays, because teams are going to take away the deep stuff. I don't know. It's one of those. This is the next part of his development into. I think he is the most talented quarterback in the NFL, but he has to take that next step and take what's given to him.
Exactly. He needs to mature, and I think that's the best way to put it. Is that he's leaned on his talent for a long time.
Yeah, got to mature as a passer,
and he's got to mature as a passer, and it's time. And they're forcing his hand in a way.
Yeah, they're making him do it in real time, which is kind of scary, because if he doesn't, then they're gonna start losing some games. They're gonna start falling behind like they did against the Texans. They're gonna get punched in the mouth a bit, so they have to kind of figure out really quick like what we're gonna do. You gotta take the short stuff to Dalton. You gotta take the check down to James Cook. Like, you gotta do some of those things that can just keep the chains moving. Keep you in ball control offense.
Or Joe Brady, you've got to. Or you're going to have to compromise a little bit and say, you know what, we're going to have to throw more downfield, riskier jump ball targets to guys like Kincaid, who can do it, and you've never let him, and Coleman, who's shown that he can. But you're going to have to have multiple people doing things like that on a play, so that Josh Allen can have his choice and not just go to one. And to me, I think Dalton Kincaid has been unbelievably misused. I think Brock Bowers is being used the way Dalton Kincaid should be used, even though Kincaid is not the athlete Brock Bowers is.
I 100% agree with you. I think from a usage standpoint, especially what you saw at Utah with Kincaid, I mean, he's, in my opinion, has the ability to be one of the true 3-level tight ends.
Yep.
He has enough speed to beat you up the seam. He's great in contested catch situations when you allow him the ability to win those one-on-ones. And he's better than you think after the catch.
Yeah.
So,
they've got 3 receivers who can do that in Coleman, Kincaid, and Shakir.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's just Josh Allen stylistically has to simmer down a bit, I think, and take the skill set of the guys you have. You passed on Xavier Worthy.
Yeah.
So you passed on the one guy that could let Josh play Eagle ball. So you get what you get, right? I mean, Josh isn't the GM, so you get what you get talent-wise, and you have 3 guys who are capable and can do that. And then Curtis Samuel as well. But, I mean, he's another underutilized guy, I think, that still has some sort of talent, but his talent doesn't mesh with who Josh Allen is. So that's tough.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see how Josh Allen's career is going to play out, because I'm pretty sure in about, if ESPN is still around in 15, 20, 30 years, there's going to be a 30 for 30 on Josh Allen's career in Buffalo. That's
Oh,
all.
100%.
That's all I'm going to say too. But I'm pretty sure there will be, and there'll be some juicy tidbits that come out of that.
For sure.
So speaking of juicy, the early thoughts on the 2025 prospects. Who are some guys that come to mind for you that you look at and you say, I'd like to talk about them, and what do they show shades of?
Oof. I think Gianti's fun just because he's just playing on an otherworldly level. I mean, man, you watch that kid play, and if Dave Montgomery and Kareem Hunt had a love child and gave that kid a jetpack for Christmas, I mean, he is an absolutely electric ball carrier. Plays with good pace and poise. He's the only back in this class, and we talked about this a little bit too before the show. In my opinion, that's just a day one starter.
Right.
And this running back class is deep, but there's not a lot of guys in this class where I'm like, this guy needs to be on the field day one contributing 60+% snaps, right? There's a lot of guys like Nick Singleton who I think are very good. I like Ali Gordon, even though he's having a down year. Travion Henderson and Damian Martinez and a couple other guys that are really good. That kid from Virginia Tech is solid too. There's a lot of guys that can play.
Bayshul, Tootin.
Yeah, Bayshul, he's good. He's physical too. But there's a lot of guys that can play. But it's going to be, are they going to be enough to supplant some of the old heads, so to speak, at the position who are getting up there in age, right? Your Derrick Henrys, your James Connors, your Alvin Kamara's of the world, your Christian McCaffreys, your Aaron Joneses, right? Are they going to play at a level where they can potentially take snaps from guys like that? Right? Yeah. Because that's going to be the change in the guard. And that's going to be the interesting part in seeing where these guys land. When we talk about like receivers, some of these prospects that I really like, obviously Travis Hunter is one of the marquee names because we don't know what he's playing. We don't know if he's going to play receiver, he's going to play DB. And I've been asked a lot, hey, do you think he's going to play both or one or the other? I think, look, this is a guy generationally that has first-round talent at either position. That is very rare to find.
Yeah,
I get the argument, well, a lot of receivers can play DB. Sure, they can because they're athletic enough collegiately. But how many of those guys are surefire first-round talents at either position? I think you don't take that away from him and let him play both at the NFL level. What it looks like defensively is going to be interesting to me. I think he does play offense in the NFL. I think you just need to get the ball in his hands. You can't look at the offensive side of the ball and say there are 2-3 playmakers on your offense that are more equipped than him. So I think you can't do that if you're a GM. Defensively, I think you put him on the field in situations. I think you play situational football with him, or you let him play 30 snaps on defense. I mean, I don't know. I mean, he can do it, but I think from a movement standpoint and just watching him with his significantly larger skill set and broader skill set above the rim and just how he plays the ball, he's very similar to Justin Jefferson.
Okay.
Just from a movement signature standpoint, I don't know if he's J. Jeff in terms of the route acumen and all that. I think that stuff obviously is a lot more raw than Justin Jefferson's was or is. But I think from a signature standpoint, what he can do, how long he is, and how he plays the ball in the air from a timing perspective, pretty similar.
So do you think there's a possibility that there's a team that says we want him as a corner and we'll give him a handful of plays as a receiver for a while?
I think so. And I think a lot of this pre-draft process is going to, for him, it's going to boil down to teams having the conversation with him during the process saying, hey, we want you to play corner. What do you think? And him saying yay, nay. If you take a kid, he's a top 5 pick in this draft, in my opinion. You take a kid in the top 5 and you basically tell him to switch positions. He might not be very happy if you're just honest with him.
Yeah.
Right. And if you're making a significant investment in a kid like that, who's a first rounder at 2 positions, you need to know which one he's most comfortable playing in the league and or wants to develop in. And or if it's both, what's your plan for a guy like that? Because you don't know. It doesn't exist.
And hopefully he's honest enough with himself about that so that he doesn't do the people pleasing. I'm game for anything because I'm just glad to be a first round pick. And then he gets into a camp and realizes he opened his mouth on something he shouldn't have said because he actually really did want something and didn't realize it. And now he's stuck. And that's kind of the concern too. Is this kid a decisive person? Do you know exactly who he is and how he is, and does he know exactly who he is and how he is?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. And no matter what you think of Deion's going to be honest with you. And that's the one thing that from watching his interviews, just
he may not be honest, but he will be honest with you about what he feels. He may not be honest about what he's saying, but he's gonna.
Correct. His feelings will come out.
His feelings will come out. If he wants attention, he may not necessarily be on point, but that's another story.
Right, and he consistently has said, he's a two-way player at the NFL level. I'm like, okay. Yeah. And then I'm like, man, like he might be right. Like I think he could do it. But also too, his development as a receiver has been fun to watch. I mean, he's on pace for 1,200 yards and double-digit touchdowns, those are great numbers.
Well, I love I'll talk about Ashton Junty a little bit too because
go for it.
He reminds me, I've watched him and people go off about the contact balance, and the plays that they show, I go, that's not, no. I mean, like, that's quickness. That's unbelievable, like, BB gun level quickness that's going on here, which is very impressive. And there is some contact balance to his game, but it's not, when I see the way they're describing his contact balance, I was waiting to see Barry Sanders, especially because of the stats that he's having that are rivaling Sanders' senior year in 1988, or actually exceeding it. But I would say he does remind me a little bit of two Detroit Lions running backs, and there's a little Sanders to his game because of the lateral movement that he has. He's just so quick with the lateral movement, and some of the indirect contact balance that he has that honestly is more valuable to me than direct contact balance, unless you're like a 225, 230 pound back, because most of the time you're not trying to lay the shoulder into a chest plate of a defender. So Jonty doesn't matter, but if you get swept at the legs and you can stay upright and quickly re-accelerate, as some of the things I've seen him do, that's great. The stiff arm is amazing because it's not powerful, but it's so well timed that he literally he beats people to the punch. And that's what you want with a good stiff arm when you're quick, is if you beat him to the punch and you can accelerate off of that or slide away further outside from it, or use the momentum that they have to propel yourself in the direction of their hit and continue moving and outrun them, in the direction of the momentum of their hit, not actually into their hit. That's awesome. So he kind of reminds me a little bit of Barry in a way, like in some of those things. But the guy that I just keep seeing is Javid Best. Like, okay, I think, sure. Javid had the head injuries and his career ended quickly, but I thought Javid Best had the chance to be an elite running back in the NFL.
Oh, 100%.
With his speed, his receiving ability, he had the contact balance and the strength for his size to be a guy that could give you the work between the tackles, because he was like a rocked up dude rocked up kind of track athlete with real running back level understanding of the position.
Yeah, he had great instincts.
Yeah.
At Cal, if you go, oh gosh, man.
Yeah.
If you watch his Cal highlights, when I was a kid, like he was one of the first backs, like when I watched college football, I was like enamored with, because it seemed there's some people where you're like, there's no one can get him to the ground.
Yeah.
And those blow by you.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was spectacular. But yeah, if you've never seen Javid Best Cal highlights, go watch him.
Yeah, and you'll see a little of the jaunty in
Oh
there.
yeah,
There's some of that there.
I agree with that.
So I like that, and I agree. He's the one guy who has a starter grade right now for me, and I'm
Sure.
far from done. But the fact that he's already hit that 85 threshold on the RSP's grading scale is a pretty good sign.
Yeah.
You know, a guy who I haven't seen how he's done this year, but after watching him last year. I like Quinshawn Judkins. I know that
Yeah, for sure.
he may not be like he has a chance to be a high end starter, but I think he's more of the guy that probably fits at best a David Montgomery type of player, but probably more on the side of Jamal Williams, old
Sure.
Kareem Hunt, you know, the momentum ball carrier, better version of Tank Bigsby in terms of like more conceptually sound as a running back. Um, when I see Mario Anderson, the Memphis running back from South Carolina, he size wise he kind of reminds me of Zach Moss, but with more conceptual acumen for again reading the field, understanding how to stick to a play design. I think he's what Zach Moss looked like against the Colt as a Colt, not what
Yeah.
Zach Moss looked like as a Bill. So Anderson's interesting to me. Kyle Manon guy is kind of a Devonta Freeman type to me,
Yeah.
like tough, not very big, but big enough, and just determined, persistent, smart. You know, some smarts with him. Phil Maffa's kind of fun. Like
Yeah.
he's in that Steven.
Clemson, yeah.
Yeah, he's kind of that Stephen Davis, Leonard Fournette kind of thing. You
Sure.
know, like he's not there with those guys. Those guys were excellent backs in their prime, but he's
Right.
kind of in that mold. You know, and I'm with you about Nicholas Singleton. You know, we should talk about him probably a little bit more. If he's truly 6 feet 224, that could be kind of impressive. That's what I saw as his measurements. If he's that, then he's more than Travis Etienne. But he could be what we hoped Etienne could become, like you
Yeah,
said.
I
Yeah,
agree. I think he could be like an Isaiah Pacheco type runner in a way.
yeah,
Very linear driven, and, doesn't have a lot of ladder, a lot of make you miss to him. But my gosh, he'll run through your face mask and run by you in the same play. Um, and that's going to be something too where he's a back that has stylistically he kind of separates himself in my opinion from this class because he has the size, speed, and also I think he does well through contact. And that's
yeah,
something too where you look at guys like Travis Etienne, like he had that Isaiah Pacheco starter pack to him, but never could finish it because he didn't have Etienne never developed the through contact skill set of high, low, direct, indirect, like can master that. Pacheco's done a really good job of catering that side of his game and making that a forefront, but also too that comes a lot of injuries, right? I mean, that's a
yeah,
different brand. That's a tough brand of football to play today, but that's one that's going to get you on the field stylistically because you can be, that energy giver of an offense, right? I mean,
yeah,
like you can be that guy and earn touches that way, no matter where you're drafted or what round it's in. But to me, like right now, like I think it's Gianti, Nick Singleton, and then maybe Ali Gordon, Judkins, and some of those other dudes.
yeah.
Travion Henderson's another one I think that's solid. In that same Ohio State backfield, but I think Singleton is one that I want to keep my eye on
Yeah.
and kind of watch his all 22 as the season wraps up.
Speaking of starter packs, there is a back in this class that I think is an Aaron Jones starter pack. He's not,
Interesting.
he is not Aaron Jones, but there are elements of his game that remind me of that, and that's Ja'Cory Croskey-Merritt, the former Alabama State, New Mexico back who's at Arizona, 5'11", 204.
Yeah.
When I've watched him play, there's some elements of his game that are just really smooth and he's a fun runner to watch who can work between the tackles and get outside on you. I could see him if he continues to grow his game, he could be a surprise. So
Interesting.
yeah, so we'll obviously we're going to be talking a ton about the 2025 draft classes, but in the meantime, let's talk about some of the guys who are on the NFL field right now that maybe aren't doing. Maybe they flashed a little something this year, but they're not starters officially yet, like guys that you're leaning on. I know you and I both kind of before the show were we both kind of we try how we do the show is like, Brandon lists some topics, I list some topics, then we get before the show and we go, which ones do you want to do if we don't have time to cover them all? And when we started talking about this one, we realized that we were on the same wavelength, that we both wanted to talk about some tight ends.
Yep.
So you first. Who are some of the tight ends? Who are some of the guys that you think could be starters a couple years from now?
I have two.
All right.
Eric All Jr.
Oh yeah.
We talked about him pre-draft. I think he should be starting for Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah.
God, I don't know why. I mean,
did you see the lead blocking against the Ravens this weekend?
Yes.
Was that not awesome?
Yes. I don't know why you start. I mean, if you're Zach Taylor and you're looking yourself in the mirror and you're 1-4, I don't know how you can look yourself in the mirror and start Mike Gesicki anymore.
Right. I mean, you could just put him in as your fourth receiver to run sail routes, and
exactly.
that's fine.
Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah.
But Eric All Jr. has been spectacular. Both as a blocker and as a receiver. I think he's been awesome. I think we saw the glimpses at Iowa, but the injury is obviously the big question mark. And he seems to be healthy. And if he was healthy, if he had a healthy last couple of years in college, he would have been in my opinion, an early second-round pick.
Yes.
He's a really good player. Second one, and someone I was really high on and hated the landing spot. Coming out of Iowa State. We'll stay in the state of Iowa.
Yes.
Charlie Kolar.
Yes.
I really like Kolar's game coming out of Iowa State. I think he's a starting tight end in the NFL. But the issue is he has two starting caliber tight ends on the same roster.
Yeah.
But I think Mark Andrews is someone obviously where, I think we're seeing a combination of they don't need that player in that offense anymore.
Yeah.
And he is not the Mark Andrews of old. I think something else interesting is someone mentioned this. The car crash he was in might have been more significant than let on.
Yeah.
From what happened to him standpoint, injury. So I don't think he might not be the same Mark Andrews. I doubt he's going to be the same 1,000-yard Mark Andrews is. We're not going to see that again.
Yeah.
But if you roll in the next year with Charlie Kolar and Isaiah Likely as your two tight ends, it makes me happy because I think Charlie Kolar is a starting tight end in the NFL.
Yeah. I'm with you, and it's funny because when he got drafted, I hated it, but I loved it at the same time. Because the guy he reminded me of was Mark Andrews.
Yes,
and I thought for sure he was the number 2 tight end in this on the step chart. Not Likely, just because I know Likely was the athlete, but I thought that Kolar was going to be the better all around guy in zone coverage. He was tougher at the catch
as a
point.
3-down tight end. Yeah, I think he's closer to a Sam Laporta.
Yeah.
And Sam Laporta is a Pro Bowler.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I'm with you on both those guys. Brenton Strange has impressed me.
Yeah.
Just really consistent with his attack of the football, good body control. When you get him on the move, he breaks tackles or he makes somebody miss. Evan Ingram will be back. Strange will be the second tight end or the third tight end, depending on how they like to use Luke Farrell, in that lineup as more of a blocker. But Strange has that ability to be an all-around guy, and I'm excited about what I see with him. I just picked up Kolar like in a dynasty league because I had the luxury. I was like, I'm doing it. Why not?
I think after that game, I'm going through all my rosters and Kolar's going to be on every single one of my dynasty rosters.
Yeah.
I just love seeing him actually get action.
Yeah.
because it's been pretty obviously sparingly.
Yeah.
It's been sparingly because of you have Andrews and likely, but Kolar is
And
someone
injury,
where
yeah.
I like, I see obviously Andrews. I think he's a better blocker
Yes.
than Andrews is, so I think he's closer to Sam Laporta than a lot of people think, in my opinion.
I think over the middle, I would agree with you as maybe a perimeter receiver.
Yeah, not quite as
not quite as dynamic, but he is good. He is definitely he's a
starter,
rugged starter player. Guy you can put a ball into a tight window and he's going to come down with it. That's his game. And so so I like that, and I love the all pick. I love I can't. Awesome. I'm not able to get my hands on all anywhere, so it doesn't even matter. I know, but he does. He looks. He looks good as a blocker. They haven't even featured him downfield yet, and that's the big part of his game. I think that's going
to be I think he's the third receiver in that offense. He should be. Like, he is, outside of Chase and T, like, Cevis has been good. He hasn't been as consistent as you'd want as a tertiary option, in my opinion. And as a red zone threat, I think Eric All needs to play. I think if you play Eric All 75+% of snaps, it's a massive upgrade over playing Mike Gesicki.
There you go. And then Jermaine Burton's got to figure out how to prepare and mature.
Yeah, it's the same thing as him and Javon Baker in New England. Yeah. It's the same song and dance. Oozing talent on both those dudes.
These were both our guys in different ways, and they ended up with the same issue.
Same shit. It's ridiculous, man. I'm like, it's just so funny, like watching, like, the press conferences have obviously dropped Mayo.
Yeah.
And then, freaking Baker says something dumb on Instagram, and you're like, oh my God. And it's like, he's gonna be inactive. I'm like, God bless America.
Yeah.
Come on.
I believe as scouts that we all have these blind spots, like pickers. Like, it's like dating, okay? Like, you have these what do they call it? Imprinting. You have psychological imprinting. Sure. The whole idea of, like, what you grew up around and experienced can lead to these issues that you don't see coming, and then you realize, if I'm going to pick somebody bad, like whether it's someone you're dating or whether it's you're scouting somebody and you go, ooh, I really like this player. For me, it's going to be an immature off-the-field wide receiver. Like that. I mean, it's not hard based on the reputation that wide receivers have as a stereotype. Yeah, but still, like, I'm the person that's going to, like, starting from Michael Westbrook when he punched out Stephen Davis. Like, that was like, Michael Westbrook was my guy. That was the one, Michael Westbrook, Josh Gordon,
it's like they'll figure it out.
Yeah,
like they're in a good place to figure it out.
Yeah, and then
they just don't. They just don't figure it out.
Yeah. So, anybody else come to mind, or are we good with that on that front?
I think those are the two. Ray Davis, I think, is someone that I think will. Down the line will be a contributor. But those are my main two. I mean, if you're listening to this and you're playing Dynasty and those two guys are out there, Charlie Kolar will probably be out there in most leagues.
Yeah.
But I think he's someone that's worth a roster spot.
Yeah. I've been joking around I've been saying to people on Twitter, Ray Davis is the one guy I want my bench all year long. And we're getting that opportunity. And everyone knows my love for Christopher Brooks, who's in Green Bay right now as the third running back. I think if he ends up with an opportunity, people are going to go, where the hell did this guy come from? So, but anyway, listen, fun show. We got to cover a good bit. As always, it's a blast to be able to do this with Brandon.
Always.
And you can check us out on X, and thank you very much for your time. And for those of you in Florida, stay safe. Hopefully you left Florida if you were from Florida, and if you didn't, you batten down. We'll be thinking the best for you, and you guys have a good week.